Where's Freeman? We don't have time to mess around here.
You've got to believe me. Freeman could be anywhere.
I'm not letting you go until you talk.
Half-Life Opposing Force was released in 1999 as an expansion for the original Half-Life. Developed by Gearbox Software, overseen by Valve, and published by Sierra Studios, the name Opposing Force has a double meaning, referring both to the fact that the player is now one of the enemies in the original game, as well as to Newton's third law of motion. So with that fun fact out of the way, let's find out in today's episode if it lives up to the original game. In Half-Life Opposing Force, you play as Adrian Shepard, a 22-year-old Marine sent out to the Black Mesa facility on a rescue mission, which is obviously very different from what the original game would have us believe. But then suddenly, aliens out of nowhere and you and your fellow Marines get their shit wrecked. You wake up in the Black Mesa research facility hours later to find out you're pulling out and retreating, and that they have different plans for Black Mesa now. So once again, you must escape the Black Mesa research facility. So let's start off with the good.
So, my reputation precedes me.
Once again, probably my favorite thing about this game is the story and the way it's told through the first-person perspective. But not only that, from a different perspective now as Marine. We get to see their side of the conflict during the events of Black Mesa, and how everything was going to hell. And on top of that, Gordon Freeman is going around wrecking all your fellow Marines. But once again, the story includes everything you'd want in a sci-fi shooter. Disaster scenarios, cover-ups, aliens, and of course those pesky Black Op ninja soldiers. But thankfully, grenades still work as good as ever. Opposing Force also adds a whole bunch of new weapons and tools at your disposal, including a barnacle gun that allows you to get to higher places. A literal portal gun that shoots portals at enemies and sends them to its zen, and finally my favorite weapon in the game, this little bugger. Seriously, the reload animation gets me every time. But not only did they add new weapons, they also added a variety of new enemies as well, including fellow Marine headcrab zombies, these giant things, and lastly, these annoying little buggers. Easily the most annoying enemies in Half-Life. The game also adds a new squad system as well, similar to having scientists or security guards follow you around in the original game, but now they can actually fight for you, open locked doors with a neat welding animation, as well as heal you, making them infinitely more helpful than the security guards from the original game. And in true Half-Life fashion, this game also has a few good boss fights that, like the original, involve setting up elaborate ways of killing them. Although admittedly, the boss fights in this game are extremely similar to the ones in the original game, except for the final boss fights. And finally, for fellow fans who didn't enjoy Zen very much like I did in the original game, no worries! Its Zen is barely in this expansion, so you won't have to worry about these stupid things or jumping around low gravity for 2 hours. But not everything is perfect. So let's discuss the bad. Right off the bat, the thing that I noticed the most about Opposing Force was just really the weak puzzles in comparison to the original game. They're all pretty damn simplistic and never took me more than a quick second to figure out, and I haven't played this in nearly a decade, so if you were hoping for some decent puzzle solving like in the original game, don't expect it. Opposing Force's focus overall is primarily shooting things, but hey, at least you get a bunch of cool new weapons to shoot, so I can't complain too much. And once again, dumb AI makes a return. Everything from the aliens, to the Black Ops soldiers, to even your own fellow Marines. The AI in this game just tends to stand there while being shot at, or run around like chickens without a head. And sadly, your fellow squad mates are open season, so don't expect them to last long. On another note, I thought the soundtrack for this game was very forgettable. I thought the original Half-Life had a much better soundtrack, and the musical cues were more well done. And lastly, of course, ladders are still a pain in the ass in this game, and it feels like you're either glued to them when you're going up, or you're falling off of them when you're trying to go down. They've also added the ability to climb ropes in Opposing Force, but those aren't much better, sadly. And speaking of not much better, it's time for The Ugly, where I discuss graphics. Now, graphically, this game is pretty much the same graphically as the original game, but still very good for its time. Overall, graphically, Half-Life Opposing Force is pretty much identical to that of the original game, but this is forgivable since it's simply an expansion to it. And you'll also see a number of familiar areas you've already played in the original game. But sadly, they never released a source version for any of the Half-Life expansions, so expect to see some muddier textures and less than great character models. Overall, Half-Life Opposing Force is a great expansion, clocking in at around 5 hours or so, and if you loved the original game, I highly recommend you check out Opposing Force simply for the number of new enemies and weapons, and also it features a number of events that explain a few things from the original game without giving anything away. And if you want to see my original review of Half-Life Source, make sure to check out the annotations at the end of the video. But now it's time for my rating. I give Half-Life Opposing Force Isaac Newton in a sumo wrestling match out of 10. Get it? Because Opposing Force? You know, Opposing Force, sumo wrestling, it's two forces. Nobody? No, okay, well, you know.